Good morning, boys and girls. This is writing. In this video, what I want you to do is go ahead and write this title down on the next clean page in your writing notebook. Make sure it's your writing notebook. And on the next clean page, like this is like a few pages into my notebook, I wrote at the top, "The day the relatives came, seed ideas." I'm going to go ahead and pause this. And I want you to pause yours and go ahead and write this down. Make sure you have August 31st. Write this down so that way you can do the lesson with me as you're listening. So go ahead and pause the reading lesson so that way you can write this down before you continue, or you're going to get a little behind. All right, so what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be teaching you that you can gather or create or pull together seed ideas from books that you read every day. We do this by making connections to the stories we read and use those connections to compare it to our own lives. This is important because it will help you come up with more seed ideas. Now let's read the book called "The Day the Relatives Came."
It was the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They laughed when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Then it was hugging time. Talk about it's just passed us all around their car, pulling us up against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours.
So I have a connection to the story already, and that's why I'm bringing you back to here. In the book, the relatives are in a car driving in between these mountains. So I'm going to have, there's mountains right here, right? And then I'm going to draw a picture. Now, Miss Busby is not the greatest artist, but I'm going to draw a picture of a car. So let me see. Here's a picture of the car. Here's the wheels, and here they are in the window going to see their relatives, and they're seeing all sorts of stuff along the way. So, and here is my road. Now, I have a connection. So remember, I'm sketching this out. This is the connection I have, is that I have gone to see this is my connection. My connection is that I have gone on a trip to see my family members. And my family members live on a road that has houses along it. And all of my relatives live actually in one house after the other. So I'm going to draw a picture of that. They, on my mom's side, they have all of my great aunts and great uncles. They all live on the same street. All their brothers and sisters live on the same street. Now, they live really far away from me, but there's my connection of a time that so here's me and my family in the car driving when we went to go see our relatives. So this is me. I am the relative my connection is I have been where in the book they're going to see their relatives. I have done the same thing. So I'm going to continue listening to the book, but I stopped and I drew this. Now, this is my connection, not your connection. So just keep that in mind. If you've not done this before, then maybe this is a connection that you would not draw a picture of. But I stopped and I jotted down a connection. Oh, I've gone to see relatives before. I stopped and I drew that. In the book, this is what happened. And this is my connection, my picture. Let's go ahead and finish listening to the video. And I want you to stop. And if you have more connections to the book called The Relatives Came, if you have more connections of things that happen in the book, but are also similar to things that have happened in your life, I want you to draw it down. Now, it's not the exact same, but they are similar ideas. Okay?
Faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. And finally, after a big supper, 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras, so a few squeezed in with us, and the rest slept on the floor. Some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden, and they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road, then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us, too, missing them. And they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. The relatives.
So, when we meet back together on Zoom, I want you to be thinking of a connection you have in the book we just listened to. Go ahead and get your writing notebook and make sure that you are thinking of, possibly already drawn, a connection to the book that we just read. Join me back on Zoom. Do not start your must-do yet. Join me back on Zoom, and we're going to be working in our writing notebooks together. See you in a moment.